you are
so
doing perfectly.
Oh
Perfect.
my God, I'm so not. Thank you, Kemi. Hello. Somebody just said they felt comforted by the floundering. That's one of my roles in life, is to flounder publicly so that other people feel more comfortable.
It's beautiful. I would be the same. I was the same on the other end going, how do I join? I know how to join. How do I join? I pressed it. How?
Every time. It's like the first time, and every time it's a panic. Everybody, I'm going to turn off the comments in a moment, but I want everyone to just say hello to Kemi and send up a bunch of hearts. And look at all those hearts. Look at
seeing all the hearts. How beautiful. Hi, Lucy. There's quite a few people.
Everybody, please stick around for this conversation, because it's going to be so good for you to hear about this incredible book that Kemi has written that is called Power, A Woman's Guide to Living and Leading Without Apology. I am so full of this book right this minute because it's just drenchingly good. And I'm going to turn off the comments now, and we're going to move into our conversation. But thank you, everybody, for all the love, the pulsing, loving hearts, and turn off commenting. Okay, cool. Now it's just the two of us and 1,000 other people. First of all, I want to tell everybody how we met, because it actually has to do with this incredible book. I met Kemi right before COVID, actually, like as COVID was striking and sailing across the world. I was in Australia speaking to her, and I was lucky enough to be interviewed by you and to get to meet you and to get to hang out with you and to get to go stationery shopping with you and to get to just fall in love with you and eat with you and walk with you. Like, we had just such a beautiful experience. Here's what stuck in my mind about you. This one moment when you said to me, there was a moment in my life when I realized that I was never going to be like anybody in any room that I walked into. And therefore, I was just going to have to be myself, because I was never going to resemble anyone in any culture because of the extraordinary backstory that you have that isn't like anybody else's. And the way you worded it to me, I remember, was like, I was either not going to belong anywhere, or I was going to have to belong everywhere. I was going to have to say that I'm allowed to be in every room that I step into. And it was one of the most powerful things I had ever heard a woman say. And then you wrote about it in this book. And I wanted to start, I was so happy to see you break that story down a little bit more. And so just as a place of beginning, I wanted to start there with how it was. Tell us a little bit about your life and how it was that you realized, if I don't step into my power, then I can't be part of anything. So I've said enough. Over to you. Everybody, this is Kemi Nekvapil. She's the greatest.
Thank you.
Thank you. Talk.
Thank you so much, Liz. Thanks for that beautiful introduction. And yes, we had such a beautiful time together. I remember you sending me that text that just said quickly, I've got to get out of here before the borders close. And off you went. But yes, I definitely got to a point in my life, and it's interesting because people will always ask me, how do I own my power? How do I step into my power? And the reality is that it comes from a base of feeling completely powerless in many, many spaces and places. So I was one of the tens of thousands of middle-class Nigerian children that was fostered to white parents in the 60s, 70s and 80s in the UK. And what that meant was that I was generally only the person of colour in a room, at school, in the classroom, wherever I was. And the universal message that I understood from a very young age was that I did not belong, that I was not worthy, and that I should always be grateful if I was allowed into a room or into a space. And I know that for those of us that have had to survive anything or navigate anything, I became very, very good of what Brene calls hustling for my worth. And I knew what whiteness around me wanted and needed so that I could have a sense of belonging. And I was happy to play the game, never questioned it. But then I remember I was 16 years old, I was at school, just had a physical education class, and my kind of friends were sort of changing behind me, and I was looking into a mirror. I was probably putting on way too much makeup, as you do when you're 16. And I just had this very visual realization of, I don't look like anyone here. I am never going to look like anyone here. And if I keep comparing myself to other people, I am never ever going to be happy with myself or who I am. And it's interesting because at 16, that was probably the biggest gift I've actually been given in my life in many ways, because I knew it to be true. And it felt like a direct download, like it came from outside into me. It didn't come up through me. And I knew it was true. And from that moment, I just decided I'm never going to compare myself. Didn't mean that I stopped hustling for my worth at that point. I still felt like I have to play the game. I need to belong. I need to fit in. I need to not be, I didn't even know about the angry black woman trope at that point, but it was there. It was there. And so I knew how to be kind and how, actually not kind, I knew how to be nice. And I say that with that edge, to be nice, but to not actually be present.
Can you break down the difference between kind and nice?
Yeah, well, good question. I feel like for everyone that's listening to this, there'd be different definitions of that. For me, kindness includes kindness to oneself. To me, kind is part of our humanity. To me, nice, it's kind of that face. Like it's kind of it can be inauthentic. And I know that not everyone will agree with that, but that's my experience, that if we go out to be nice, for me, it was inauthentic. I would walk into rooms, especially in my mid-20s, and my whole intention was, I'm going to be nice. I'm not going to let anyone think I'm a threat. I don't want anyone to think that I'm any threat to them at all. I'm going to be nice. And in doing so, I wasn't even there. I wasn't even present to the people and the spaces that I was in. So that's my personal distinction and definition between kind, which is an extension of who we are as humans, and nice, which can take away from our humanity.
That's the best definition of it I've ever heard. And you did that on the spot. Thank you. I was really moved. Okay, so one of the things I love about this book, and if anybody's just joining us, we're talking about this book called Power by Kemi Nekvapil. One of the things that I loved about it was the humility, which is such an unexpected thing to find in a book that's about power, but this is exactly the kind of actual power that you're talking about. Has to be grounded in humility, or else it's the old bullshit model of power, which is exactly what we're trying to take down, right? And one of the you show your vulnerability so tenderly in this book, and in times so heartbreakingly. And one of the vulnerabilities that you shared that I really appreciated was that you expressed when you had this inspiration to write this book, and even the title came to you, and you were like, oh, I have to write this book called Power. And then, now I know this as a creator, this happens to me all the time. I get an inspiration, and the very next thing that happens is the doubt and the fear and the second guessing and the panic and the, oh God, I can't, oh, I shouldn't, I mustn't, this doesn't even make any sense. Why have you given me this assignment? You know, like wherever these assignments come from cosmically, like, no, give this one to Glennon, give this one to Renee,
someone else.
You know, give it to somebody else. I don't want this. So I'm familiar with that feeling, but I'm not familiar with it at the level that you exposed here. And the way you write about race in this book is so powerful. And so what I got from reading this was that you had an additional thing. You didn't just have that imposter syndrome that all creators have when they're about to start something and they're not sure if it's right. You had this deep, felt like existential fear that you expressed here of, I must not write a book that upsets white people. I must not write a book that triggers white fragility. I will not be safe if I do that. And you must not make the white people upset. And so I cannot talk about race because it might scare them and upset them. And that's not something, obviously, that I've ever had to grapple with. And I want to commend you for doing it anyway. And I learned so much from this book, and I needed to learn what I learned in this book, and other people will too. But how did you find the courage to break the rule, especially the rule that you grew up in, where your life was literally dependent on nice white people? And I'm saying nice in the way that you said, you know, how did you find the courage to break the rule and to speak your story with such honesty and vulnerability, even the parts that might upset the white ladies?
Yeah, and you know, thank you for asking that question. I actually got goosebumps when you said that, because you're right. That was my upbringing. I was the people that parented me were white people. I think that's part of the humility in there. Some of the deepest love I have ever known has been from white people. I've had 5 white mothers, and obviously my Nigerian birth mother as well. But part of that and part of my lived experience around that was, I cannot upset these people as they'll let me go. I cannot accept these people as they will say they're not my mum anymore and they're going to move me on to the next house. So I had to navigate that all the time. As I was writing the book, yes, the title Power came to me, and straight away I felt, who the hell do you think you are to write a book about power? But you know who was saying that to me? White men. That was the voice that was saying that to me. And then I realized, oh, that's why you have to write a book about power. And you can write it as a Black woman who has been loved deeply by white people and loved deeply by Black people, and learning to love myself as a Black person. I also can't take away as well that I have 25 years of yoga and meditation practice. And so for me, living into and understanding, once again, kindness and compassion, and it's why in the book I wanted to break it up. I knew that the Anglo-white women that were reading the book needed a different message from me than my sisters of colour or non-binary people that were reading the book. And I feel that, and I've had quite a few actually white women message me and say to me, I don't know how you allowed me to read your experience and not in any way feel threatened. And I don't think that that was necessarily my intention. But as a coach, as someone that asks questions, I want to give information and I want to share stories that actually lands for people. And if we feel attacked, we disappear. And I wanted people to understand the stories and the messages. And I felt the way to honor that was to speak to different groups of people at the beginning of the book to ground the book.
You tell an incredible story in the book about a moment where there was a dispute in school, in your kids' school, which could have turned into 2 mothers fighting each other about what happened between their sons, which is a story that we all know happens all the time, and fires people up to their most angry, defensive, scared. I mean, literally mama bears in the ring.
Yeah.
Like, you're threatening the thing that is the most important to me, my child. Your child threatened my child in some way. And I was so moved by when you talk about learning as a coach and as a yoga teacher and as a meditator, nonviolent communication. You gave this example of feeling cornered and threatened and attacked and defensive of your kid, as anybody would be. But walk us through how you handled that conversation, because it was like a masterclass for me in what you just described, like how to not have the conversation shut down. I found it really moving.
Well, actually, I have to pay tribute to my mother-in-law, who worked in schools for many, many years. And she said to me in one conversation a few years ago, a parent is always going to believe that their child is right. So be mindful of that if there are any disputes. So I just kind of had that as a little seed that was planted. And then with my training and all of those things that you've mentioned, I knew how volatile these conversations can become in the playground around children. And I just wanted to give this mother space to say what she wanted to say. It was my child that had hurt her child. And I wanted her to feel heard. And I asked her, is there anything else that you want to say to me about it? I just listened. Is there anything else that you want to say about it? What does he need? And it was actually my non-binary teenager that did the hurting. And I said, what is it? Is there anything that my child needs to do so that your child can feel better about what has happened? And I think because she had been heard, she was then able to communicate what it was that she needed, or what she felt she needed. And that was an apology. And actually my child had already given the apology. So I said, was the apology, not quite how you wanted or something? And she actually said, oh, I didn't realize an apology had already been given. I'll check in with my son. But she actually just said, we ended that conversation with, thank you so much for listening. These things happen. Kids can be, you know, as they're trying to figure out who they are, they can be mean and they can also be loving. And it really ended with a sense of respect for who we are as mothers, and also giving space for the children to kind of work it out in some ways, that we don't have to go in. I'm kind of an anti-saving mother, to be honest. I'm sort of on the other side of it. I'm a little bit of healthy neglect, and I'm here, you know, I'm here for them 100%. But I'm not a savior, because I know from the childhood that I've had that the reason I am who I am is because I kind of had to figure it out on my own, because I knew in my lived experience that no one was coming to save me. So I'm here for my children. They know that, but they also know that I trust them to figure it out. The pain, the devastation, the joy, the success, all of it. And yet I'm here when they need me to be here.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. Talk about the power over model, which is, you said something really profound in the book about how when people see injustice and racism and misogyny and all the power being pooled in the hands of, you know, what a certain percentage of white men, and they say the system is broken, and you always want to correct them to say, no, that's a misunderstanding of the system. The system is working exactly the way it was designed to work. There's nothing broken about it. It was designed for this purpose, to keep the power held in a certain number of hands through this intimidation of power over model. And so can you explain about what that means, so that when we read in your book about power, we know what you're not talking about as a good definition of power, and what, you know, what we're here to dismantle?
Yes, well, you know, 100% that phrase was what I learned from Brene when I trained with her around the Dare to Lead program. And her description of it, which I very much align to, is that power over is a form of power that is done to people, that it's hierarchical, that it's comes from a space of scarcity. If I have power, you can't have it. And I will hold on to my power at the expense of everything. And we see that played out everywhere in the world right now. And so this idea of the power that I'm talking about is the antithesis to that, that it is abundant, that it is regenerative, that if I have power, I'm not afraid of your power. I can stand next to you and elevate you and support you. And together, in a form of power that is abundant, we then can do the work that we need to do in the world, instead of this idea of scarcity. And that, yeah, that it's not an external power that is given to us. It is a power that is created within us, for us as individuals, and collectively as humanity.
Can you teach us the acronym that you came up with for power, that is the sort of chapter division of the book?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I think you'll appreciate this. I'll share a little story of it as well. As I was writing...
Tell stories. I love stories.
Yeah. Well, as I was writing the book, you know, I was bringing together all of these stories from different stages and phases of my life. And I was kind of like, I know there needs to be a structure. And my editor and I are kind of looking at, what is the structure of this? How's this going to go? And I went to bed and I knew the structure of the book was in the word, but I didn't know what it was. And I just trusted, you know, the creative forces would come to play. And I just wrote down on a Post-it note, power. Went to sleep, next morning did my meditation, and it just came to me. Power, ownership, wisdom, equality, and responsibility. And I just knew it, bam, done. So then I started to look at the stories that I had written, and I could just see how they fitted under each of those. So this idea of power, this new form of power, a power that we can hold with and for each other, is that presence is number one. That we need to be present to what is and is not working in our lives. That we need to be present to ourselves so that we can authentically be present to other people. And our inability to be present to ourselves has a massive impact in how we show up in the world, because we're disconnected from ourselves and from others. The next is ownership, that we need to take full ownership of our stories, those we have been told, those we have witnessed, those we have made up, those we have lived, and those we have experienced. And when we can integrate all of those stories, the good, the bad, the ugly, even if we judge them, we don't even need to judge them whether they're good or bad or ugly, they are. And actually taking full ownership of our stories allows us to feel powerful in the world instead of hiding. The next is wisdom, that we all have an incredible internal wisdom, and yet it is trained out of us from a very early age. Personally, and this could be controversial, my husband and I decided we were not going to teach our children stranger danger because we didn't want them to believe that everyone that they met was a danger to them, because we know statistically that is not true. The people that are generally going to be harmful to our children are the ones that we let into the house. So, you know, this idea of wisdom is that we have it, and that we have to, if it's been trained out of us, reignite it in ourselves and trust our inner guru or our inner mentor and not outsource our lives. The next one is equality, which, you know, I have a lived experience of that, of feeling unequal often, that we all have an internal equality because we're human. That is it. We have different external resources, but our equality is never in question. And then finally, responsibility, which is my favorite personal and professional development tool. As I shared earlier, I learned from a very young age that no one is coming to save me. So I decided I am going to be responsible for my life. That can have a shadow side, because sometimes then that means, you know, my second book, The Gift of Asking, for those of us that have had to survive and like, I'm independent, I can do it on my own. The shadow, just there, ready. Look at that.
Oh, it's never far from me. I love this book.
But that is the idea, is that when we decide we are responsible, even if the most horrendous, devastating things happen, we can decide, I am responsible for my healing. I'm responsible for the action that I take next. I'm responsible for my words. It doesn't mean that life is easier in any way. In some ways, it's harder, but it means that we can lay our head on our pillow at the end of the day with a sense of, I showed up in the world as who I want to be. And that's the POWER acronym.
So good. You must have been so psyched when you came up with that. I know as a writer, when you get the structure and you're like, oh my God, I've got it. It's going to be like divided up into.
Yeah. And also, you know, that's why, you know, your beautiful book, Big Magic, as well, kind of talks about the magic of it. Like I just kind of knew part of the creative process is asking for outside of me as well. I don't have to have it all in here generated. If I'm open and I can surrender to other forces, then maybe I can get the answer.
And the more you step into power by your definition, which I much prefer to our culture's definition, which your friend and mine, Martha Beck, defines as, if you do not please me, I will hurt you, right? Yeah. Like that is our cultural definition of power. And that's what our whole society is based on.
And that's the thing, isn't it? Is that so many of us have been hurt
too.
And that's the thing, is that so many of us have been hurt for it. And that is why I knew that it was a risk to write a book, especially that's geared towards women, around power, because I knew I had to redefine what it is, because so many of us, for those of us women, those of us identify as female, we have been hurt by that form of power again and again and again, every day now, in so many ways, that I had to distinguish, this is not that. No, of course we don't want that. That's why we think, I don't want power. Power feels horrible. Yes, because what we've been shown is horrible and destructive. But if we step away from what power can be, we do not get to bring this new form of power, which is a form of power and leadership that the world needs right now, without exception. And it's happening, and we see it in so many ways. But what I don't want is for women to step back thinking, I don't want that. I want us to step forward and say, look what we can create as a collective for each other together. And it's new and it's generous.
You just got a whole bunch of hearts, clouds flying up when you said that. There was like I feel like if we were in an actual room, there would have been a little standing ovation on that. Thank you for that. I felt that too. So going back to the acronym, you've spoken about presence, and I know that you're a meditator and that you're a longtime yogi, and that you also, part of the way that you claim your presence is by defending your time to make sure that you have enough time to do the spiritual practices that you need to do to stay okay, and the physical practices that you need to do to stay okay. I cannot remember where I read this, but there was a female artist who said in her memoirs, my solitude has absolutely no value to anybody but me. And that is why no one respects it, and why people think that they can barge in on it and take it, because I am only valuable to other people for what I give to them, right? So if I want to be an artist and a creator and a spiritual person, I have to defend my solitude because nobody else is going to, because my solitude has no value to anybody. And I feel I defend my solitude very strongly. And I defend my spiritual practices and the time, like that, I honor that, the rituals that I have to do every day. And I was wondering if you might tell us, because I know people love to hear about this kind of stuff. What are some of the rituals that you defend? How do you defend them? How do you make sure that you have enough space and time to do the things that keep you well so that you can stand in your power?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because for me, I actually think that my solitude is of value to everyone else, because I can guarantee you no one wants to be around me if I haven't given that to me. You know, I love the work that I do, and I love the work that I do because I fill my cup every single day repeatedly so that I can be of service in a generous way, not in a resentful, overwhelmed, frustrated way. And so for me, the moment that I realized I want to be of service, and especially I want to be of service to women, I knew I have to give myself what I need so I can show up that way. And so for me, you know, a little caveat before I even say this, because I know that there are so many things out there where we as women can feel so broken because we feel like we're not doing the things. And I really want to say, I have been practicing these practices for 25 years. When I didn't have children, that was 2.5 hours of yoga at 4 a.m. in the morning. When I had children, my yoga was 5 minutes in the shower, talking to myself, thinking I was going mad, pretending there was another adult there. That was my meditation, that 5-minute shower. That was my adult conversation. So I share this now as someone that has a 16-year-old and an 18-year-old. I'm in a different stage of life. But one thing I did do when my children were very young was that I would say to them, Mum is meditating. So I'm going to have my eyes closed and you can come in the room and you can speak to me and I will not answer you because I'm meditating. So you can come and sit next to me and you can meditate, but you cannot speak to me. And you can speak to me, sorry, but I will not answer you. And I kept saying that to them. And they'd go through stages where they would come in, they'd sit to me, especially my youngest, they'd like sit with their, like really concentrating on their meditation. And sometimes they'd leave and sometimes they stayed for longer. But I knew I wanted my children to see that I looked after myself, what that looked like, and the boundaries in place around that. They now know that from 5 a.m. till 7 a.m., they don't have any access to me. You know, they just don't. I have an hour of my practices and then I write for an hour in the mornings. And my other, you know, another form of my practice as well is gardening and nature and being out in nature. Being a runner, but going out on trails like in the forest fills me up, gives me a sense of magic in the world. All of these things fill my cup so that I can show up for the people that I need to and want to show up for.
Such an incredible gift that you gave your kids to see that, because I often have, and I'm not a mother, so I have no right to say a goddamn word. But anyway, I'm going to.
Go on, but do it anyway.
Yeah, go on. I have no right to.
No apology. No apology.
I often hear mothers ask me how to instill creativity in their children, and I have no better advice to give them than let them see you doing it.
Yes.
Because kids, as we know, will never do what you say, but they kind of can't help imitating you, the good and the bad of you. So the more, like, my mom was always doing creative projects that had nothing to do with us, like that we were not welcome in, we were not invited in. She didn't want to hear from us, she didn't want to talk to us. She was busy, she was sewing, she was gardening, she was doing her thing, you know. And so I think I grew up with this great sense of entitlement that I was allowed to have a thing. And it wasn't because my mom was driving me to violin lessons, because she wasn't. We were just, you know, she's like, go, this is my thing, go find your thing. You know? But I saw, oh, this is like, women are allowed to have their thing and they can protect it and defend it.
Yeah, and it's so important. Like, and this is a different thing. Like, I know whenever there's a conversation about motherhood, there's always, you know, such opinions and variations. But for me, coming from England, we don't really have the same culture as here in Australia, where at the weekend, a lot of children will go and do sports. And I have some friends and some clients and colleagues that love sport and they love driving their kids to sport, and that is fine. But I also have the same amount of mothers that hate driving their kids to sport and hate sport and grimace and resent their way through it the whole time. There's so much power in taking ownership of, I don't like it. There's so much power and ownership in asking the mum or the other parent that loves it, can you take my kid so I can do my knitting or do my gardening, or can we do an exchange? Because I was very clear that I wanted to be present to my children, that that was the value that I could bring, that I had no intention of being everything to my children. What a burden on me, and what a burden on them as well. I know, you know, that African proverb that it takes a village to raise a child. From two of my foster families especially, community was huge. So my first set of foster parents and my last set of foster parents, I got a real sense that individuals within communities had their own gifts and talents to bring. And I wanted to raise my children in very consciously created communities. And I would say to certain people that we would meet that would come into our life, I'd literally say to them, I would love for you to be in my children's life. Completely separate to me. Bring them what you have to bring them. I have no interest in this thing. You're passionate about it. And I'd always say, don't hit them, like, you know, but set boundaries. Tell them what's not okay. Yeah, don't hit them. I thought it'd be good to be clear about that. You know.
Could you not hit them? But could you also inspire them?
Yeah, exactly. But just trusting that trust. And what's so beautiful now is that my teenagers have these people in their lives, these other adults that can bring them things that either I have no intention of bringing them, or I'm not good at, or have no interest in. And it gives them a diverse life with all of these people that care about them and respect them. But it's not all on me. I don't see motherhood. I don't see my role as a mother to be everything to my children. That would be suffocating to me and suffocating to them.
On the other side of that too, I just want to say, I, as a childless woman who's auntie to a lot of my friends' kids, I have completely independent relationships now with my friends' kids in their teens and 20s. I love them. They're my friends. They're my actual friends. Like I remember saying to my friend Aiden, who's now in his first year of college, when he was such an extraordinary kid, when he was about 8, I said, Aiden, I'm so looking forward to being your friend forever, because I can already tell that you're going to be such an interesting person, and we're friends. Like we, you know, we go out to lunch in New York together. Like he's my buddy. I
He's
love
a friend.
So and it's great for me because otherwise, you know, it keeps me young. I hate to say that, like, but it does. It keeps me connected to culture, and and it makes me have multi-generational real friendships.
I feel so gifted with the friends that my children have, and spending time with them and being a trusted adult for some of these young people is such a gift and such an honor, because I really believe that this generation, I don't like it when our generation say, oh, the next generation, they've got to take it on, they've got to change the world. It's like, no, take responsibility. Like, we're still here. Why are we dumping it on them? But their vocabulary, their language, they will not take the things that we took when we grew up.
I love this generation. I love them. I love the generation
what a
that
gift.
Your kids are in. They're
what
amazing.
A gift they are.
They are amazing. I want to talk about ownership. You speak very eloquently in the book about ownership of story and how imperative it is that women own their story, and that they tell their story, and that they share their story, and that they don't hide their story. And yet you also talk about, there's a paradox and there's a balance, and I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this. And we spoke about this when we met in person in Australia too. There also has to be a certain care about not having your story exploited, and in tragedy porn, right? And how so much of your life has been about, I've got this tragic, difficult story of overcoming these 5 foster homes, and that's all the story anyone wanted to hear from you. Like when you first became a public speaker, they're like, tell the story of how you overcame the worst and most difficult thing in your life. But you had other things you wanted to talk about. You didn't want to keep milking that. And it reminds me of something that my friend Rachel Cargill has taught me about, which is that when white kids apply to colleges in the US, their essays are about their accomplishments, their achievements, and their dreams and their passions. And Black kids, their stories are about their tragedies, their difficulties, their trauma, and that's what they have to sell in order to get the position at the school.
To be allowed.
Like they have to tap into some sort of, you know, and she was like, they don't get to tell the story about their passions, their dreams, their excitements, their achievements. It's almost expected that they have to tell the story about their difficulties and their tragedies. And there's been studies, sociological studies on this, reading these college essays and this difference. And so I wondered if you could share, and maybe there's not a simple answer to it, but how you navigate that, of owning your story, telling your story, and also not being exploited for your story and not falling into trauma porn.
Yeah, well, and I actually did have an experience with that with publicizing the book, that a very, very well-known magazine decided to just take one story. That's a very difficult story for me to write, but it was very important in the book. And my PR and publicist sort of said to me, this is the one story. And I just said, this was what I was scared of. This was it. And when we went back to them and said, you know, could we add some context? Could we add another chapter? They're like, no, that's not really what this is for. And I thought, no, you're going to have that story in there. And then the next few pages are going to be makeup. And the reader is just left with this sense of this horrible story of what this horrible black child did to this white child as a response to what was being done to me at the time. And the thing is, I just wrote a book about power. So it was very clear to me what I needed to do. It was a no. Wow. It was a no. And it is a fine line. And we do need to take ownership of our stories. And as Brene said, not everyone is worthy to hear of our stories. We have to be safe. I think that as people of colour, part of the system, part of the structure is that we feel that we do have to share any trauma or tragedy that we've had. And it's why, for me, my activism is about joy and delight. Like, I know that for me to be a black person that enjoys beauty and grows flowers and shares them, that is already butting up against this story of my childhood. And actually, but it's because of that, because my first foster parents actually had a kitchen garden, and my last foster parents also had a beautiful kitchen garden. So in two of the places that I felt the most loved, there was growth and there was beauty, and obviously that had a huge impact on me. So for me, I share my story when I want to, with whom I want to, and if that particular story of my childhood and being fostered and being the only black person in white spaces is a part of me, but it's not all of me. It's what makes me who I am. It's my why, but it's not my excuse. So it's all of these things. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And I'm so impressed with, it's not a small thing, everybody, to, when you have got a book coming out and a major magazine offers to print an excerpt of it, to say no. You know, it is not a small thing. Like, in a scarcity world, you know, where you're hustling for approval, that you have to allow that, because that might be the only attention you ever get. It might be the only way that you can ever sell your book. That you might make them mad, you know, like that level of scarcity. But you don't operate from that. Like, that's what I want people to hear, that your no is a definition of abundance, that you knew that you can say no to this, and then and that you still, you know, you still get to create, you still get to produce, you still get, you know, like, you're fine.
100%.
Nobody who's living in scarcity can ever say no to anything. Because it might be the last age thing you ever get. You know?
Yeah, and I also believe that is an age thing as well. And I've been here long enough. I'm 48, and I trust who I am at this point, and I believe in abundance. And I think that's the beauty about being in nature. It's everywhere. There's abundance everywhere. And I know that there would be other people, you know, maybe, I have to say, maybe 10 years ago, if that offer had been there, I would have still been in the story of, this is the only way that people are going to understand about my work or learn about it. And I would have been 100% hell yes. I would have felt pretty yucky afterwards, possibly, but I was used to feeling yucky. So it's as we get to know who we are and trust who we are and what we believe in, the no's actually become pretty easy.
I want to go back to the power of your humility. On page 72, I was really moved by something you wrote. You said, when COVID hit, you wrote, everywhere I turned, inexperienced people were giving advice on how to get through a global pandemic. As a coach, I was experiencing a slight internal pressure about this, thinking that I would be expected to join the online fray and launch a product or give advice. But I didn't have advice to give. One, because I am not an expert in navigating a global pandemic, and two, because I was going through it too.
Mm.
I love this. I was sounding my mouth off like crazy, by the way, at the beginning of COVID, giving all kinds of advice, giving all kinds of offering meditations. You know, I read that and I was like, oh wow. I might have maybe should have shut up
It
a
was
little bit.
you. I was talking about you.
Because here's the line I loved. I didn't have advice to give because I'm not an expert in navigating a global pandemic. Guess what? Neither was anyone else, right? And yet you had the humility and the wisdom. This is going back to the W in your power exchange about wisdom, which could also stand for wait, right? Which brings us to the power of the pause, which is something that you spoke about. You ultimately did craft a response to, which I would love for you to tell people about, because it was a beautiful response and it had a lot to do with joy, and it wasn't necessarily the expected response, but you paused. And I want to talk about what you did in that pause, so that instead of just reacting, you actually came up with a response, how long that pause was, and then how that response was generated, because that story to me feels like a really good definition of wisdom.
So I, retreated to the garden because I couldn't go any more than 5 kilometers from my house. And I went on walks, and I felt like I do want to be of service in this time, but I'm going to trust that it's not going to be a reaction. I'm going to respond. And that was where the pause came in. And I was out running, and I was running towards one of my favorite kitchen gardens in this area where I live in Melbourne on Wurundjeri country. And I was running towards this kitchen garden, and the sun just hit this sunflower in a way that I just stopped. And the cyclist behind me probably could have had some warning, but it was really beautiful. So I just stopped. He kind of swerved, and I apologized, but I was just gazing at this sunflower, and I just thought, it is so dark in the world right now. I want to share the light. I want to share light in the darkness, because we know that there is always light at the end of, or at some point of darkness, if we're willing to look for it. And that was when I launched the Delight Diaries, which was a very simple, Instagram was the platform, where I asked people to share their delight of the day. And it was just called the Delight Diaries. And I would share moments of delight. People would share things like, I'm dancing in the kitchen, eating watermelon with my children. The way that my dog ran and kissed another dog this morning at the dog park. The way that my partner stroked my arm this morning. How good my coffee tasted this morning. These really small moments, because I thought the world has always had devastation happening all the time. And depending on where you live and depending on your privileges will depend on whether or not you're exposed to those tragedies, but they're happening all the time. And it's why art is so important, and why beauty and creativity is so important, to balance out these harder, tougher moments. So that was my pause, and that was what came. And I also know that there were people contributing at that time that also people found very helpful. Like, I do get that. And I'm sure your wisdom was abundant and rich.
I don't know, Kemi. I remember just recording a video from my bed, like, how's everybody doing out there? I'm not sure, but anyway.
Well, I was also, because I also felt that this idea of powerlessness, there was such a push for people to be doing. And I just thought that's having so many people feel like the only thing I was doing in the first 2 weeks of the Melbourne lockdowns was eating crumpets and watching reruns of Friends. Like, that was my, okay, how can I respond to this global pandemic? That's what I need to do right now. That's what I'm going to do. And to allow it to be okay for people to just feel what they felt. And that was okay. You didn't have to write a novel during the global pandemic. And for me, it was kind of with the beauty. It's like, this is what we have. It's always here. Nature's always here. We can share these things as well.
Yeah, you guys, you don't always have to be learning French and the cello.
No, not always. Not
Sometimes
always.
you can just watch reruns and eat crumpets. I want to talk about the forbidden word ambition. You speak about, tell me about your your history with that word, your transformation with that word, what you used to think that word meant, what you want women to understand about what that word can mean.
Yeah. So I started off with a coffee date with a colleague at the time, a corporate colleague who I really respected, really generous, powerful woman. We're having a conversation and she said to me, I love your ambition. And I remember feeling incredibly, what's the word? Kind of put off in that moment, stunned, a little bit offended. And she said, oh, did I say something wrong? And I'm English. So I was nice. There you go. And I was like, no, it's fine. It's fine. Thinking as I went home, why would she call me ambitious? I'm not deceitful. I don't stand on other people to get what I want. I'm not one-minded. And, you know, I don't know why she would call me that. And I kind of got angry with her and thought, well, I'm not going to have coffee with her again. And then I thought, but you really respect her and you think she's really generous. So maybe you need to look up the definition of the word ambition and see what it actually means. Now, I'm a big fan of the Oxford English Dictionary for no reason that I need to explain. The Oxford English Dictionary's definition of ambition is the ability or desire to do something. That is it. That's it. So then I was like,
wow.
So where did I pick up that ambitious women were untrustworthy and deceitful? And I thought that is part of the system and it is part of the structure. And once I read that, I realized I am ambitious. I have a desire for women to take up space without apology. And I'm going to take ownership of that ambition and allow other women to own their ambition at the same time.
There's another standing ovation happening right now in the responses. It's so good. I love it. It's like real time. I can feel everybody's emotions across the globe, like
that's so beautiful.
Fractaling of like, yes. You know, I when I used to do my podcast, the Magic Lessons podcast, I had Glennon on there, and I remember saying to her, you know, in the interview, why do you write? Why did you become a writer? And she said, I want to be seen, known, and heard. And I was like, you can't say that.
Yeah.
You can't say that. Like, I was so shocked. And we had ended up having a conversation about it because I was like, that feels like terrifying to me to hear a woman say that. Like, you're not allowed to want to be seen, heard, and known. Your answer is, let me just tell you what your answer is supposed to be. If you're a nice lady, your answer is supposed to be, I want to make things that change, that help people. I want to, I want to make sure that I'm in service. I want to add my tiny little thing to the world. And just have
my small,
but
not too much.
Hear her say, I want to be seen, known, and heard, was like, what shocked me was not that she said it, it was my reaction.
Your response.
My internalized, which brings us to like your very, very useful definitions about internalized patriarchy and the power of imprints. Because I feel like that was my internalized patriarchy. You know, like, oh no, don't let any man hear you say that. You know? Even though I'm like marching through the world, of course I fucking want to be seen, heard, and known, but I would never say it. You know, like
no, don't say it. Exactly.
You're not allowed to say it.
Yeah.
Like,
and you know, the reality is that we historically have been burnt at the stake for taking up space and owning our wisdom. And it is in us. We know, and we're still burnt at the stake. Women are still burnt at the stake, and women of color in different ways, and women navigating the world in larger bodies, and trans women and non-binary. It happens all the time. It is incredibly scary to be seen and heard. But the beauty of it is that when we give each other permission to be seen and heard. And we will back you and we will support you and we are here for you when if they try and bring you down. And one of the most powerful things is to own our internalized racism, our internalized homophobia and patriarchy. And the list that I put in the book, like as I say in the book,
such a good list.
And when I sent out that text to my friends and colleagues, you know, ranging from 15 years old.
Tell everybody about that. Yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, well, I just sent out this text very quickly. It's actually a Sunday morning. And I sent out a text and I just said to people, what does your internalized patriarchal voice say to you? That was all it said. the responses were just bam, bam, bam. And to be honest, I'd got a third way through before I was in tears. And I called one of my friends because she actually said, it is endless. Don't be too fat. You must always be likable to men. Men will look after things. Don't have too much money. Be a good mum, be a good wife, be a good sister, be a good daughter. Like, it was just, don't speak up at work because you won't get the promotion. If you get the promotion, make sure you stay small. Like, it was just endless. And this one friend who just said, the voice is just never ending. I feel like it's bigger than my voice. And I actually called her and we had a conversation and we were both crying because of this sense of grief that we believed it. And we continue to believe it, like it will come up at random times. But then we also were in hysterics of just how ridiculous it is, just how made up it has been, and how it comes from this sense of scarcity and power over. Because if that system, that patriarchal system, which is also really destructive to men, this idea that they are one-dimensional.
It's not helping the guys either.
It's not helping the guys either. Definitely is not. That we believe that this system is even true. You know, it actually is laughable, and yet that doesn't diminish the damage that it has done and continues to do.
Another thing I love about this book, I love everything about this book, but another thing I love about this book is that it's very practical, in addition to being very poetic, at times soaring and sweeping, and then at other times, like, you know, you're a coach, so you're not going to just write about abstraction, you know, you're going to, so like there's lots and lots of like, you know, there's work you can do in this book. And I love the promise that you make in the beginning of it. And by the way, if anybody's joining, we're talking about Power by Kemi Nekvapil. It is so excellent. One of the things that I loved is, and I've already put this into play just from reading the book, how you present yourself in language in emails. In business emails, and transforming questions like, what works best for you? So instead of saying that in an email, transforming it into, could you do this thing for me? Right? Like taking the authority, or turning, I think maybe we should, into, it would be best if we. Another example was, could I possibly leave early? Transforming that into, I will need to leave. You know? So where did you, this is like such good, I'm already noticing, because of the imprinting, I'm noticing how I automatically do all of that, stroking, apologizing, minimizing, you know, pleasing, the terror that I might accidentally extend myself too far and get in trouble. At my age and in my position, my terror that I'm going to get in trouble somehow for not being nice enough, gentle enough, sweet enough. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you came up with all of that.
Yeah, and now you've because I got that from an incredible woman whose name has completely escaped me. Is it on the page that you're looking at? Because I definitely just have to give her
page 166. Hang on,
166. Let's find it, because I can't speak about it
in
until
my notes here, because I'm a good
credits
student,
where
because
credit
I never
is
want to get
due.
in trouble.
Here we go. Searching.
I swear 166. Here it is.
Oh, here we go.
Maybe 167. We will not stop till we find this name.
We can't. We have to find her name.
Give credit to the person. I'm just seeing clients, students. Please hold everything.
Danny Donovan. Woo! Yes, found it.
Page 1.
So this,
okay.
Yeah, got it. Oh, thank goodness. So this came from Danny Donovan. Have a look at her on Instagram. Neurodivergent woman who takes full ownership of her story and is of service from that place unapologetically. And she had done this incredible graphic around how to be mindful and powerful in our emails. So when I first read that, I took it on, and my goodness, it saves time. I mean, I don't think that's why she did it, but it's a time saver, because as you said, you're not apologizing with every sentence. Hi, so sorry to bother you, but I was just hoping that to just say, be kind and clear. You know, Brene again, kind and clear. We don't need all the fluff. It doesn't mean that we're not being I mean, who wants to be a good girl, to be honest? I'm more interested now in being a fully self-expressed woman than being a good girl. But that actually we can communicate things without apologizing for every single word that we say. And so Danny Donovan says in this beautiful graphic, go and find it, go and hit her up. And it just says, instead of saying, does that make sense? Which I still fall into sometimes, say, do you have any questions? Just assume that what you say makes sense, that you are an articulate human being who makes sense. And then if anyone has any questions, they can let you know. But it's these very small tweaks that really empower our language and stop us from apologizing for having a voice.
Oh, so good. Okay, so whenever I get in this book club, I always love to talk to people about craft. So before we close, I want to talk to you because so many people who are listening to this want to write. And so I always want to make sure that we give encouragement, love, tricks, tips, what your story was, how, you know, taking ownership over stories. One of the things that I know stops a lot of people from writing is their fear about what people will say, what their family members will say. Not wanting to get in trouble. So I wondered if you could talk a little bit about how you find the courage to create. I'm just finished a first draft of my 10th book, you know, and it's still scary as hell every single time. Yeah. It's still like, do I have the right to do this? How, you know, like, do I have anything to say? Yeah. Oh my God, how are people going to react? It's frightening. It's never not frightening. So I wondered if you could just talk about how you got over what I assume, if you're a human being, was a frightening experience to write not one but 2 books, because she's also the author of The Gift of Asking, which is an amazing book. But yeah, how do you overcome all the demonic terrorist voices in your head, which are probably similar to the ones in mine, saying many variations of who do you think you are? Yeah,
and this is part of the craft. And once again, going back to Big Magic and also the work of Stephen Pressfield, and for any creative that has written about the creative journey, that is part of it. I don't spend time trying to fight the voice, because if I'm fighting the voice, I'm not writing. I actually read from another author who says, when the voice comes in, the who do you think you are, is that even, you know, a thing? To just write it down, to just write down what the voice says, kind of like, oh, thank you. Just write it down and keep writing. Oh, thank you. Write it down, keep writing, get it out of your head. This is an author, actually an Australian author called Catherine Devaney. And that was so powerful to me. I rarely write it down now, actually. I just know it's part of the process. But what I do say to people, I'll just share, a journalist said to me, did you always want to be an author? And I was stunned by the question. I said, I grew up in 1970s England. The only authors on my reading list were white men, not even females. And I loved that writing, loved it all. I was in the Royal Shakespeare Company, loved Shakespeare, loved language, loved it. But nowhere in there was a mirror or reflection that I, as a Black woman, could write books. It wasn't until I became older, like my late teens, that I discovered for myself Black female authors. Even then, it still took time for me to realize I could do that too if I wanted. So what I say as my impassioned plea to anyone is that if you want to write, please write. We need you to write. We need to hear your story so that we can see ourselves, and it gives us permission, whoever we are, wherever we come from, to know we are worthy and that we do belong, and we do not have to apologize, and we are allowed to take up space as who we are. And we can't get that if only one particular type of person writes. Please write.
I'm raising the roof. It's your duty. It's your duty. It's a public service. It is
a public service.
It's a public service to tell your story.
Yeah, we don't want, and we don't need perfection. We just want humanity. We just want your humanity. That's all I think that's all any of us are trying to do, is to say, this is what it is for me to be a human. And the more of us that can do that, it really, really becomes a very powerful place for all of us.
I would so much read authentic writing than perfectly polished writing. You know, it's like sometimes I read perfectly polished writing and I'm like, nice house, but no one lives there. I'd
Nice.
rather go in a ramshackle house where somebody actually lives and look around and
Yes.
see what this light, you know, like
See the
really,
cracks and the cobwebs and yeah, what happened
truly.
here? Yeah.
I want to wrap up. I hate to let go of you. I miss
Yes,
you.
I feel the same.
I also love that. I just want to tell everybody that every once in a while, Kemi will call me and sing. And it was such a beautiful, we'll just do like long distance Australia to New York karaoke on WhatsApp. And I just cherish you. And I'm so grateful for your existence. I'm so grateful for your power, for your example, for the mirror that you're offering to others, and for what I got out of this book. Um, you're a life-changing human being, and it's wonderful to have you here. And
Thank
I
you.
wanted
Thank you,
to
Liz.
close. You are so welcome, my love. Um, on page 297, you talk about an exercise you learned when you studied with Brene Brown, the I am exercise, which is not so much about creating a mission statement, which it's about creating a being statement about what you already are, right? A mission statement is about like what you want to become or aspirational, which is great, but this is a whole different thing. And I wondered if you could talk about that exercise and what you do with it, and then if you could read us your I am statement, because I think that would be a really beautiful way to close the conversation.
Absolutely, I would love to. And before I do that, let me say thank you for who you are in the world. And thank you for the way that you use your platform. And thank you for the way that you give so many people, to, especially women, giving us permission to show up in the world unapologetically. So thank you for who you are. And I'm glad that we found each other.
Me too.
Yeah.
Love you very much.
So here we are. This is a poem called I Am. And it will look different in 10 years. In 5 years even, but this is what it is right now. I am Kemi. I am of Nigerian heritage and an English and Australian citizen. I am black. I am of fostered stock. I am a multi-passionate and I am proud of this fact. I am here to serve. I'm a lover of boundaries. I'm an introvert. I'm a lover of beauty in its many forms. I am wounded. I am a creator. I am a connector. I am a maker and a grower. I am in my body. I feel things strongly. I am a true and loyal friend. I am a good enough mother and a top shelf wife. I am flawed. I am not an apology. I am growing. I am whole. I am worthy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't even want to contaminate the air after that with our words. I love you so much. The book is called Power, everybody. Kemi Nekvapil. God damn, I'm sick of stumbling over that. I love the first time I pronounced your name wrong and you said, I have trouble with it too. I should have married somebody whose last name was Smith.
That's right. Kemi Smith would be so much better. You marry someone with Czech heritage and that's what you get. But anyway.
I adore you. Everybody, please follow her on Instagram. She's an incredible coach, a leader, a teacher, a singer, a gardener, a mother, and a friend. And thank you so much for joining us. Now, before you go, we have to do this one thing, which is I need you to smile and we have to take a screenshot so that I can use a good screenshot. Otherwise, we'll just be stuck with the horrible ones that Instagram gives us. So, okay, ready?
Okay, yes.
Smile. All right, we got it.
Yay.
Everybody, thank you so much for being with us tonight. We love you, and Kemi, be safe and be healthy and be vibrant and be powerful.
And you too. Power to you, power to everyone.
Bye.